This Alzheimer's Moment has been brought to you by Eldercare Resources of Olympia.
Hello, my name is David Robinson, and I'm a geriatric social worker. I work with Eldercare Resources, and I'm here today to talk about some of the work that I do on behalf of the South Sound Alzheimer's Council. And that work is really helping families better understand how to manage the care of someone as they're becoming more forgetful and more confused. Oftentimes, family members are at a loss as to how to respond to someone when they're saying something that is obviously confused. And an example might be that suddenly someone is talking about, well, where's mother? You know, when their mother has been perhaps deceased for some years, or perhaps they're talking about wanting to go home when they're actually at home. So there are a number of things that can come up that families are sometimes confused about how to respond to. The behaviors that frequently caregivers struggle with are some of the issues are related to someone who may still want to be driving when they're no longer safe to be driving. But oftentimes the biggest problems that family members encounter is just the unrelenting demands of what are we going to do today, and feeling the responsibility for kind of keeping the day organized and full of activities, and that can be challenging for families. And that's a really important tool in terms of managing behavior, simply because if someone is engaged in meaningful activities, they're much less likely to be creating other kinds of problems that may come up. So keeping someone occupied and engaged with meaningful activities is an important aspect of managing the behavior. Difficult behaviors that families find challenging. We mentioned the driving as being an example, and really what that's an example of is that someone who is determined to do something that maybe is no longer safe for them to do. Other examples of behaviors that families find challenging is just the general resistance that some persons who are becoming confused or having memory problems will exhibit. And when I'm talking about resistance, examples would be suddenly the family is wanting to get them to take a shower or a bath, and it becomes a battle. They're very resistant. Sometimes, very commonly, people will become very resistant to maintaining their hygiene, and taking baths is an area that's very common for people to have struggles with. And oftentimes, in terms of how to deal with that behavior, really, I'm going to give some general guidelines as to what to try in dealing with these kinds of behaviors. First and foremost, I would suggest that in terms of managing the behavior of someone with dementia, your ultimate goal is to figure out for this individual what makes them feel safe and secure. And for everybody, that's different. What you're trying to figure out, though, is based upon this individual's life experiences and their frames of references. What are the things that make them feel comfortable? What are the things that make them feel safe? And if you can figure that out, most people can learn to keep to a minimum the disruptive behaviors. I think so many people fear that a person with Alzheimer's is going to become angry and combative and agitated. And yes, those are some behaviors that come up, but those are not behaviors that all people with Alzheimer's experience. And a large part of keeping that to a minimum is keeping an individual kind of on an even keel, keeping them feeling safe, feeling secure, engaged with meaningful activities, and having caregivers who know how best to respond when they are exhibiting some confusion. I often have used the analogy for family members of the concept of dementia is kind of like entering into the world of the logic of Alice in Wonderland. Except in this case, it's Alice in Dementia Land. And it's trying to, when caregivers learn that there is a new logic, and they can minimize the frictions that come up that lead to these disruptive behaviors. And I'll give some examples. Oftentimes, the biggest mistakes that family members make is that they continue to insist on trying to reason with the individual, explaining to them perhaps why, when they're insisting that they want to go home, if they try to now explain, well, no, you're already home, and trying to explain the actual logic of their circumstances, that will just make them angrier and more upset, because after all, they know when they're home or not. So you can't use logic. You have to enter into their world. And if they're insisting on the need to go home, as an example, how I might respond to that in a way that makes them feel safe and secure, I might start talking to them about, well, what are you going to want to do when you get home? And maybe even getting in the car, going for a ride, stopping and getting an ice cream, coming back to the house, and when you get back to the house, guess what? You're home. So rather than arguing with them, go along with them and try to find the way to make them feel safe and secure. That's really how you manage this care. And sometimes we're going into a different kind of a logic of Alice in Wonderland, but if you will enter into their world rather than insisting on explaining things based upon our logic, things will suddenly get a lot easier, a lot smoother. So that's what we're trying to do. What I would like to say too is that so often people with family members feel that a diagnosis of Alzheimer's is just the end of the story, the grimmest diagnosis you can have, and that there is no hope. And what I can say very honestly is that the lives of persons with Alzheimer's, despite that being a terrible disease, the quality of life with persons with Alzheimer's can be very good. And the important work for us and the South Sound Alzheimer's Council is to enhance their quality of life.
For more details, contact Eldercare Resources of Olympia at 360-789-8364 or at www.olympiaeldercare.com. For more resources in your local area, search the web for Alzheimer's resources in your hometown.